Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm Robbie Krieger, the Flip Flop Flipper. Today we're having a conversation with my new friend Justin, Orlando property advisor, and he's got a great YouTube channel. We're gonna have some conversations about what's happening in the Orlando market. Buckle up, it's gonna be a fun one. What I wanted to talk to you about for my audience is what's happening in Orlando, Florida. I'm watching your content and I love what I'm seeing, what I'm hearing you say. And I also like that you have some knowledge that I don't have, my audience won't have. So I want to ask you some questions around where do you see the Orlando metro area going? And we can talk about price per square footage and population growth. There's a lot of things that are exciting here in Central Florida that you kind of have your finger on the pulse of. Why don't we start with, where do you see kind of Orlando going near term and sort of midterm? I'd call near term the next 18 months, year to 18 months, 2 years, and then midterms 5 years out, long terms anything after 5 years.
Absolutely. Wow. That's a good question. Being in real estate for the past 12 years and watching Orlando grow, I've lived in Mineola, Claremont before it was just orange groves and retirees for the most part. I've lived in Dr. Phillips and I love that area. Lake Nona boomed. I was there for 10 years in 2014 till 2024 and now Winter Park. And just watching the greater Orlando metro grow. That number we talked about before this show, 5.2 million people by the year 2030 is the projection. Now that includes Sanford, Kissimmee, just the whole greater Orlando metro itself. But when you've got 130,000 people net migrating to just greater Orlando over the past 3 years, those are people that are actually staying here, not moving away. That just means our schools are going to be more crowded. People are going to be hunting to be in the areas that are most desirable to them. And they want to find reasonably priced homes. Mm-hmm. And we'll talk about price per square foot in a second. But for me, that number is under 300 a square foot. Once you get above 300 a square foot, it doesn't really feel like value. It feels like a luxury. You're paying more because you want to be in that area or in that lot or that house or that school district. And there's certainly justifications for it. In Winter Park, we're at like 600 a square foot.
Crazy, isn't it?
For brand new turnkey, which is definitely a luxury property. But I don't see that changing. I see it plateauing. Mm-hmm. So to answer your question, I think we're in for a plateau for a number of years. Maybe slight increases in market appreciation depending on key factors such as newness, lot location, rarity. That's the ones you still see sell quickly. But the ones that need to correct, they're either going to just correct slowly and they'll find that right price that feels like value, or they'll put in the work and they'll renovate, or they'll rent it out and wait because they know what they have.
Right. Okay.
So long term, I hope to be in real estate in 10, 15, 20 more years. I want to raise my kids here. I want to continue to do real estate at a high level all around Orlando and advise people on good purchases, whether that's investors, relocations, retirees, short-term rentals, all around. And I think Orlando was somewhat undervalued pre-pandemic. Miami was expensive. Tampa was expensive. Sarasota is very expensive. But Central Florida, you could still get a decently sized house for $450,000. Now that's kind of like our entry level. So that presents a problem. So we're going to need to continue to be pushing outward or find those renovation deals on the in-term, on the inside, where you say to yourself, I wasn't going to look at homes built before the year 2000, but this 1996 or 1989 home has some nice renovations done, and I love the street and the neighborhood and the kids' school nearby. And we didn't expect ourselves to buy a 1989 house, but this is nice.
Yeah.
And one of those examples is Winter Springs. I love that area because you get the bigger lots and you're adjacent to Oviedo, Winter Park, and you're not in those cookie cutter new constructions that are just, sharing a wall with one another.
Yeah.
But you're not too far out either.
Yeah, you have some space to live. I grew up in Winter Springs, so I'm glad you talk about it as a growth spot. We haven't invested there in many years, but we love the Winter Springs area. It has great schools. It has, wonderful amenities. Seminole County is fabulous, right? So yeah, I agree. and it's not as pricey as Oviedo or as pricey as some other areas there.
Yeah, you feel like you're still getting value.
Yeah, Lake Mary, for instance, is very expensive in Seminole County. Winter Springs is just as nice, has just the same amenities, but has some value, some room to grow. So I like that.
So I guess long term, if you pick out the most expensive, most desirable areas of Central Florida for whatever reason, whether it's bougie, whether it's near theme parks, best schools, that's where people are going to continue to gravitate to when they relocate into Central Florida. And then within those areas, depending on their budget, they might have to find a deal to be in that area, which I love that, because not everybody is going for that ultra premium luxury brand new thing. Some people just say, I don't need the biggest, baddest home on the street, but I want to be in this area. And that's how real estate should be. Location, location, location.
That's right. So when you think about price per square foot, and I like tying it to the near term, the midterm, and the long term again, what I've sort of seen and the thesis that I work on as a real estate investor is that we've had this price per square foot shift. And it seems like it's doubled quickly, right? Like it used to be, and not too long ago, maybe even when you were in real estate 12 years ago, $100 a square foot was a reasonable kind of price for a pretty nice neighborhood, but that's no longer the case.
That was, I think my first home in 2009 was like the worst time to get a job.
Yeah.
Because the economy was just in the gutter.
We were in the thick of it.
And way out in Mineola, I got a brand new Lennar home for $220,000, 5-bedroom home, 3,000 square feet.
Wow.
It was $99 a square foot.
Yeah.
So those days are gone.
and they're not coming back, right? Like
No.
that's not coming back. So it shifted from, you could 10, 15 years ago, you could buy a house and expect to fix it up and sell it at $100 a square foot, pretty much in any normal type neighborhood. I feel like that's gone to $300 a square foot. So I say doubled, but it's actually tripled in a long enough period of time.
I think that's right now it's 200. If you find a decent school district by the numbers, decent size property, right? Because the larger the house, usually the better the price per square foot you're going to be seeing. And it has just maybe some other endearing qualities, like the street is really nice. And if you can get it for $199 a square foot, that's usually a good price.
That's a good price. And then if there's some value add, some fix up, taking it to $300 a square foot's not unreasonable.
Well, maybe with some seasoning period.
Yeah.
Not flipping it right away,
Right.
but buy and hold. Using it for yourself, possibly, for that Burr method where you're using a primary mortgage, and you're not committing mortgage fraud. But that is something I think people could experience over the next 5 years, is looking in those key areas and saying, I love this area. I'm willing to do a fixer-upper. I've got the contacts with Robert and these guys and their vendors, but I need to get it for the right price. And there's definitely sellers that waited forever, and now this is their moment, and maybe they missed the boat by a year or 6 months, but they still do need to sell. So that's what we're seeing, and it's still getting me excited to say there's deals out there.
But I think we're heading into this season of where people are going to start to feel like I'm missing the boat, right? Like you said it. So we've had low inventory, and things have been able to sell, and we really have pretty much always gone up since COVID. And right now, I think we're just at that tipping point where people are they're going to kick themselves if they don't sell this year or next year. And they're going to be saying things like, oh, I missed the boat. I could have done better had I sold 6 months ago.
Well, they got to do the work too. Like that's just because guy down the street got 300 a square foot and you got a similar size house, but does yours look as good?
Right.
Have you checked on the systems recently?
Right.
Because those are all things that our buyers are so critical about now, because they're spending all their money on the mortgage.
Yeah.
And if you're gonna get that premium price out of them, you have to show that it's worth it.
Yeah.
So doing the work now.
For the last few years, you just if your neighbor sold for 300, your house could be slightly worse. You'd still get 300. Now it's going to change, and you're gonna, if you want top of the market, you're going to have the nicest house in the neighborhood.
But back to price per square foot, just a couple streets up from where we're at in 2018, 2019. I know we talk about it like it was 3 years ago, right? 2016 to 2018, that period of time. There was a little bit of a slowdown in the market, if you remember.
Yes.
And selling a brand new Winter Park luxury home for $360 a square foot.
Wow.
And I had other realtors saying, you're never going to get that price. And the seller had to reduce a couple times. They finally got it sold for probably, $350 a foot.
Right.
And now that same thing, if it's up to snuff in today's standard of quality, finishes, and condition, could easily fetch $500 a square foot.
Yeah.
So I think we've raised the bar. We're at this plateau for a while. Do we have room to go higher? Absolutely. There's lakefront properties at $1,000 a square foot. Golden Oak, $1,300 a square foot.
And these guys are prices that were unheard of really only 5-6 years ago. This
Look
was
at
completely
Fort Lauderdale.
unheard of.
There was the guy that bought my last house that I sold to come to this house. He had a little bungalow or a ranch on one of those canals out to Fort Lauderdale. And he renovated it. It's a little 3-bedroom thing. And they're at $1,000 a square foot.
Wow. And so that's what I'm wondering, and I have a thesis that we've reset the bar. We're probably not ever going back to where we were in 2010, 12, 13. We're in this new era now where I believe that a normal person's house is going to be $300 a square foot. Something fairly nice is going to be $500 a square foot. And then luxury's $1,000 plus a square foot. And I don't see that getting worse, even if we have a little bit of a correction and it goes to 250, 400, and 800. 5 years from now, that'll all be a thing of the past, and it'll be 3,500, 1,000, or it'll be 4, 7, and 1,200 a square foot. We're just going to keep going up for the foreseeable future, especially long enough term.
Yeah, I think the big builders like the Pulte's, Lennars, KB Homes, all that, they're still land acquiring further out. And Pulte acquired that big down by the airport Everby, which was an old naval base, and they're doing 4,000 homes and townhomes in there.
I didn't even know that.
Yep, it's right where the 528 meets the 417.
Yeah, I know exactly where you're talking about.
It's near Lake Nona, but it's not in Lake Nona proper.
Yeah,
but they're
Boggy Creek area.
No, just north of that.
Just north
so
of
the
that?
other side. Boggy Creek's also a huge development corridor with the widening of it and the Osceola Parkway extension. But Tavistock controls all that land north of Boggy Creek Road with Lake Nona proper. So the point of me telling you this is the dirt. These developers paid millions of dollars for this dirt. So they're separating it out chunk by chunk, and they're keeping their prices high. They might be incentivizing these new construction projects and saying, we'll buy down your rate. We'll get you a 3.99%. So that's a solution to keep homes moving, which I wish more private lenders had the ability to do on listings. Say we'll do a 2-1 or a 3-2-1 rate buy down. First year, 3.99. Second year, 4.99. 5.99 for the life of the loan.
Wow.
I would take that.
And new home builders have the flexibility to do that. These regular homes, like in this neighborhood, you go to the bank, you go to your mortgage broker. That's not happening. It's definitely the developer's able to kind of drive that by paying for that for the buyer.
And then they can keep the actual prices high, so they don't really show there was a dip.
Right.
But word on the street, you talk to the guy who just bought that Pulte home. He's like, I got $50,000 incentive.
Yeah.
Well, okay, good. That's what got you to say this feels like value.
That made it a deal.
Ultimately, that's what we want for our buyers.
Yeah.
And we want sellers to realize that if you do want to actually make the transaction go through, sometimes you got to get creative.
So that leads me to believe that as a real estate investor, I should be looking at new builds, especially if times are going to get a little bit tougher for them, because they're going to incentivize us to buy them. So I like that. So if you're listening to this, there's more than one way to skin a cat. And we as real estate investors, we often think we got to buy it. And I say, you make your money when you buy. You got to buy it so cheap. You got to get the best price you can, get the deal of a lifetime. But the deal of a lifetime could be that you pay $500,000 to the brand new home builder, and he gives you a new Mercedes-Benz in the garage and buys down your rate with there are lots of things that these big developers can do when times get tough and make things more affordable. That leads me to my next question. How do you see the young people, the ordinary guy, getting to where they can buy a house? Because over the last few years, we all know everything has just skyrocketed. Everything except the wage that people are earning, right? So the price that my parents bought their new house for back in the 70s compared to what they were earning was way different than what's happening today. So, and the people are making a lot more money, but they're paying way, way more of that money towards their purchase. How do you see this playing out?
Absolutely. That is the hot button topic. with first-time home buyers, entry level into any of the price points of Orlando, not just the lowest price point. But I'm currently working with a single guy who's looking at townhomes in the Lake Nona area for around $375,000 to $400,000. Now, some of these townhomes, I used to own one that was like $200,000 back in the day. But it's just a function of what these things cost now. $350,000 to $400,000, there's not a whole lot out there. You got to find it. Might be a one-car garage townhome where you're sharing a little unit, right? Yeah. But for him, and this is the advice I'm giving him, is first of all, have a significant down payment. We need to be looking at more like 20% down, so you're borrowing less. If that's not an option, maybe you get gift funds from parents. There's also currently a loan program out there, which is the Hometown Heroes, which gives free money, zero interest. You got to pay it back if you sell the property, when you finally sell the property. But up to $35,000 of closing cost assistance you can use for down payment. That's a government-funded project. When I bought my first house in 2009, Obama gave us $7,500 to use for down payment. And as long as you stayed in the house for 2 years, you didn't have to pay it back.
Wow. And so now it's $35,000.
Up to, yeah. It depends
so my point is, even $7,500 10, 15 years ago has now turned into $30,000.
Yeah, and I'm not suggesting that people should just buy a house using government handouts. That's the only way you can afford it, But I think every little bit helps.
Well, and take what's available to you, right? Like, we invest in areas where the government will reward us, right? That's one thing that a real estate investor developer should be thinking about, is like, they want you to invest in multifamily and they'll give you this tax break for doing it. So you take the low-hanging fruit. If you are going to go out there and buy your first-time house and there's something available to you, I think there can be shame of it sometimes, right? Someone will think, oh, I don't need that. Well, listen, it's there for you. Take it. Take advantage of it. And if Justin can show you how to do that, man, take the free lunch.
Yeah. Well, his mom's actually a real estate agent who referred him to me, and she was surprised. She's like, I didn't know he qualified for that.
Yes.
So just staying up on the latest and greatest. Now, but the real thing I'm giving him this advice on is, does this make sense, right? We want him to hold this property for at least 5 to 7 years. This is not something you're going to buy and sell again in 2 or 3 years. If that's the case, just keep renting. But with rents approaching $3,200 a month, $3,400 a month in these hot areas for a similar size 3-bedroom, 2-car garage type property, not an apartment, if you can get the mortgage payment all in, including HOA, principal and interest, taxes, down below that rent number, and you have that maybe 10% down saved up with minimal PMI, you should go for it.
Yeah.
And you should also ask the seller for some concessions and say, Mr. Seller, I'm at this price, but I want $10,000 back in closing costs. Dollar for dollar, that closing cost money is going to help you much more so than saving $25 a month on the interest payment.
That's great advice. I love that. So I'm thinking there are incentives to buy new houses. We tell people on our channel all the time, buy something, and we use the 5-year mark. If you can buy something and keep it as a rental property for 5 years, in our experience, generally you're hitting this grand slam home run. You're giving the same advice only to homeowners. It's, if you're going to live in it for 5 years or more, you really have a hard time not making money on that deal. Even if he's paying top of the market for that townhome now, 5 years from now, he'll look back and go, wow, it turns into an investment, right? He needed to live somewhere anyway.
Right.
And like you said, rents are $3,200 a month. I'm guessing he can get a mortgage payment even with the higher interest rates for that or less right now, right?
Correct. Yeah, we ran all the numbers. And we also look at the comparables, what has sold in the past 6 months, a year. We look at the location of that unit. Does it back up to a busy road, power lines, none of that stuff. But when it's all gelling and you're like, you know what, this is a good location. The seller seems motivated. Look at the payment you're going to receive. And then rates just dipped. This past Monday, we had that stock market sell-off.
That's right.
Japan markets crashed, basically. And just for a moment in the morning, you could have got 5.875.
Wow.
That's a point less than what it was a month ago. So we're waiting for more events like that to really coach people and say, hey, horse, we led you to water. It's time to drink.
Yeah, I wonder if that's going to be a thing. Like, if rates drop, 1% would be amazing. Do you think that that's possible, that rates are going to drop a whole percent in the near future?
Absolutely. I think the Fed is going to have an emergency meeting because they waited too long and they put us in a rough spot. And whoever gets elected, doesn't matter. we're going to see multiple rate cuts going into December. Now, these could be very small, okay?
Yeah.
But there's bigger factors in play, recession fears, cost of groceries. Something's got to change. And the housing market really moves us along. So any attempt to get that moving again is something they're going to have to do. And I think a lot of realtors, besides myself, had said the number that we want to target for a steady, even keel is 5.5.
Okay.
I think at 5.5%, however you arrive at that number, whether you have to buy it down a little bit or if that's just the target rate, that is something that people are comfortable borrowing hundreds of thousands of dollars to pay the interest on, because it doesn't feel like you're just bleeding money away in interest.
Yeah.
Especially when it's your primary residence.
Yeah. So you're affirming some kind of theories that I work with. So as a real estate investor, I'm often working and investing on a thesis, and my thesis will change from time to time. And currently the thesis is that it's going to soften and that it's going to be a better time to buy properties for me as a real estate investor for the next year or two.
I would agree with that.
Than it has been for the last 5 or 6 years.
Yes.
And then my thesis would be that we're going to get these rate cuts. And even though things are going to soften, it's going to immediately bounce back up. Like, we teach the world what real estate prices look like, and they generally don't come down, or they don't come down for very long. So I like what you're saying in that I can buy and kind of safely know that even if I buy and I'm a little bit mistimed it and it drops a little bit, if they do this rate cut and it happens quickly, this is going to go right back up to what we were talking about earlier, where I'm thinking 300, 500, 1,000. Those are the price points. And if I can buy today at 200 and it drops to 280, I'm still safe. And I agree with your timeline. 5 years is the timeline that if you keep things for 5 years, you're generally going to make a bunch of money.
Well, to that end, this coming January, February, March, the spring selling season, you're going to have the retail customers who lived in a school district for a number of years, and now their child's moving up to the next school and they want to go try out a different part of town, or they're relocating out, or it's the silver wave of boomers selling their beautiful properties finally. Right?
Yeah.
And so they want all the stars to align. They want to check and make sure it's a good time to sell before they put it out there, because they know what they have.
Right. And
that's going to happen come hell or high water this February, March, April, May, June. So if rates were to adjust slightly back into that 5.875, 5.6, that would be a great environment for them to list. And all these buyers that are on the fence that have been waiting for quality inventory to list and a little bit better way to buy, those are going to dovetail well. That's going to clear out the stock of good inventory, but there's still going to be deals out there that didn't sell.
Yeah.
Which is because their condition, their location, asking price was too high, didn't do the work. So that's still going to be an opportunity for an investor to look at those.
Yeah, and for us as real estate investors, we're really only ever looking at a very small portion of the market, right? Like, so I'm a value add real estate investor. I'm not looking at least 85, maybe even 90% of the properties that are on the market. They're just not for me. I'm not ever going to be the retail guy. So it's a small window there. I would say maybe it gets to be 20% of the market sometimes, but most of the time it's probably 10% or less that we're actually looking at that could even possibly be a good project for someone like myself. So I like to be kind of reaffirmed. You have your finger on the pulse of what's happening in Orlando. We sort of sat out Orlando, the COVID stuff. I moved out of Orlando in 2016 and 17 when it softened, went for greener pastures. Now we're coming back because we see that there's going to be some opportunities here as real estate investors. So it just goes to show there's always something for everybody. And I love it. Anyway, appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, I like to be optimistic, cautiously optimistic about our future here. It's been great riding up the train. And I got into real estate in 2012 when it was at its bottom. It was short sale, bank owned, foreclosure. You had to be really patient and see a lot of properties. We saw auction properties with holes in the roof
Oh,
and
man.
mold in the walls.
And we were buying auction properties for no money, like, $10,000, $15,000 in bad areas, $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 in other areas. I remember during that time buying row homes in the Nona area for $60,000, $65,000. These are the things that you're talking about right now, selling for $380 or something like that. And when I hear you say it, I'm like, man, I think I probably bought 10 of them. Why didn't I keep a couple of those?
Yeah.
But I don't think we go back to that.
No.
But
No.
It's a good time to,
But
to be in the
I have
Orlando
seen
real
a
estate.
few short sales pop up. Doesn't mean they're like the best deal. It's just the word short sale, meaning they owe a little bit more than what they think they'll net.
Yeah.
I did see an interesting auction one. It was somebody had flipped a building that looked very awkward, and they tried it at a high price, but then they're trying some gimmick where they put it at auction at a very low entry bid, but they probably have a reserve.
Yeah.
So it's more gimmicky stuff, not really aggressive deals. I still think the deal finding is timing, patience, and a little bit of luck.
Yeah.
To acquire a good property in a nice area at a value price.
No, that's for sure. That's always the formula. You have to, for us as real estate investors, because we're looking at such a small window of the properties, we have to look at everything to find those, we call them deal of a lifetime, right? And that's what we're trying to buy at this point, is something that's just very clearly a great deal. And so when the market is going up, it's a lot harder. When the market starts to come down, there will be more of them, but it still takes just a lot of time and effort to go out and look at all of these properties and then negotiate them. And it's a lot of fun.
Well, one other thing I wanted to speak to when you said about where do you see the market going and areas. And I talked about the growth of Orlando, right? The expansion. And I see those growth areas, the path of growth going outward with this beltway, if you will. Orlando is an urban sprawl. We're going an hour to get from one side of Orlando to the other side of Orlando. And they're still building more highways, believe it or not. From the 429 on the west side all the way out to US 27, Claremont, Schofield Road, Olympus Project. So imagine if you got some new construction, townhome, single family, and they let you rent it out right away. Sometimes they make you wait a year. And then you just wait for 7-10 years, and that whole area is boomed. So you'll be happy at the price you bought in at.
That's right. That's a sound investment, I think, to buy these new houses, assuming you can.
And then the
rent
renter the one thing I was going to speak to, the renter profile, right?
Yeah.
I know you do focus on a lot of the lower end, entry level rent prices, and that's great. And you're in the interior, and they're generally smaller.
Right.
When I look at 1,100 square feet, I'm like, it's way too small.
Who would live there?
Yeah. But a lot of people are like, that's great. It's better than 600 a square foot.
Yeah, that's right.
Or 600 square feet. But with these areas I was describing, the newer construction, the schools, the jobs, medical city, all that, you're getting townhomes renting for $3,000 a month.
It blows my mind, honestly.
So there's enough meat on the bone there.
Yeah.
Right? To own something.
Yeah, you can make that work for sure. So, and when you're seeing these new constructions, generally they're not building 1,000 square foot or 1,100 square foot. They're usually building 2,000, 2,200 square foot, two car garage type homes. Even the townhomes are 1,600 square feet.
They're nice. They're big.
Yeah.
No maintenance.
No maintenance.
You do pay a little bit
really
higher
big.
HOA.
Yep.
Sometimes they have CDD fee in the taxes too.
Yeah, I hate those
So
CDDs.
fees, right? So don't expect to cash flow like tons and tons of money. If you can break even, that means you're probably borrowing very little,
right?
Or you own it outright. But it's the feeling of security, growth, high quality tenants. My tenants right now are medical city grad students. They're becoming future doctors.
Yeah. All
they do is study. So they're going to stay there for 3 years as they become a doctor. So zero turnover. I love it.
Yeah. So you really focus on Lake Nona. You love Lake Nona. You live here in Winter Park. You're in some pretty good areas. We invest in, like you said, the growth areas that are kind of at the heels of these. That's been a consistent thesis of mine, is to try and see where the path is and then get on the cutting edge, the leading edge of it, and buy these things and wait, right? And if you can do that, wow, it's a great life. So we say that all the time. So I appreciate you having this conversation with me. So tell people how we get a hold of you and how they find your channel, and I'll put the link for you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'm Justin Pekarik, your Orlando property advisor. You can check me out on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, at Orlando Property Advisor. We cover new construction. We do the parade of homes every single year where we tour you through the best custom homes in all of Central Florida every single year. I'm the host of GOBA, Greater Orlando Builders Association's Parade of Homes, for the past 5 years. We love to feature our listings. We love to feature comparison tours all around the area, people relocating here, and of course, investor talk, which is why we brought in Robert and McKenna. And we'd love to have you guys subscribe to our channel.
So we just had this NAR settlement. I think they're blowing up a system that has worked phenomenally well for decades. I don't understand it, but it's a reality we live in, and it's just gone into effect here in Orlando or Central Florida, or really all over the states. What are your thoughts on what is this going to do to your business, to your way of life? I mean, to me, it's a disaster, but I'd love to hear what your thoughts are.
Yeah, it's an absolute shit show.
Okay, we're aligned.
And no one really knows what's going to happen. No, I think part of it's going to be business as usual, but with more value to the end consumer, meaning the average commission has been slowly reducing over time, and this just basically accelerated it. And there's consumer reports coming out right now that says if you sign a buyer's agreement, do not pay them money in advance. Make it so it's a flat fee if possible, and not more than 2% of the sale price of the home. That's an actual report that's been put out to consumers. Right. And then you have EXP, major brokerages, saying that they're not going to share commissions between brokerages. They're going to talk to their sellers ahead of time and say, you might want to offer a compensation to a buyer's agent when they do bring an offer, but they're going to reserve that for when they actually get the offer.
Yeah.
And what's already started to happen is buyer's agents are texting the listing agent saying, are they offering anything? You're like, look, for a strong offer, absolutely.
Yeah.
Our goal is to get the home sold. If you bring us a strong buyer and a strong offer, we're absolutely going to coach our seller to say, you need to be offering the buyer's agent some compensation, because we can't work for free.
Right.
Okay. And the flat fee stuff, for those people that want to say, well, I'll do it for a flat fee. It's like, well, what do you get what you pay for.
Yeah.
Okay. And to be honest, the 24,000 agents that we had in Central Florida, that whittling down needed to happen sooner rather than later. And this is going to be a mass exodus of, 40% of those realtors.
Yes.
But the ones that are full-time, that are knowledgeable about their specific area, that work with a specific type of client, and can really advise them on all the intricacies of not only a transaction, but an area, and get somebody to the finish line, that is absolutely still worth a compensation package paid by the seller.
Yep.
Okay. Now, as far as if that's going to be paid by the buyer, similar to a commercial broker, when you put forth a letter of intent and you say, my buyer's already signed this. If the seller doesn't want to pay, they're going to pay me. Well, all the more power to you, Mr. Buyer's agent. If you can show your value and show someone, here's why you want to work with me. When you work with me, you're going to get my full attention. You're going to get all my knowledge and data. I'm going to sit at this desk every morning and think about you. I say, what can I do for this customer to help them today?
Yep.
And I'm going to drive all around, find the deals, point stuff out that you wouldn't know about during the course of the deal. How much is that worth?
Right.
But convincing someone to sign that before they even go see a home, that makes no sense.
Very tough.
So what will happen in the beginning is there's going to be signed papers that say, hey, I'm working with this buyer. And I think that's very smart, because we all always had buyer representation agreements, right? But those are not really enforceable. And if things go south in the relationship, someone could just say, I'm not working with that realtor anymore. I'm going to switch to this other realtor.
Yeah.
So you still have to earn the trust and respect of your customer. That's not going to change.
So I have a couple of questions, just because we're so new to it. And we just put a property up for sale. We talked about it on a recent video with you, right? As a seller, and he's the broker, when someone calls us up and says, hey, what are they offering? Are buyer's agents just expecting that we'll say 3%, or has it shifted dramatically to what would you advise your sellers to be telling buyer's agents that they will pay?
It's a great question. I've gotten phone calls over the years, way before this settlement, from part-time realtors that this is maybe the one commission they're going to make the entire year.
Right.
Okay. And they say, I see you're offering this in the MLS, but if I bring a buyer, would they offer more? And I'm like, where's this greed coming from? I've never done that. I never called up and say, I want more commission if I bring a buyer.
Right.
Just bring the buyer.
Right.
So that's the answer, is when you produce an offer, then you can write in what commission you want. And the seller can say no.
I like that.
Everything's negotiable.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's not this predetermined thing. Nothing's for certain until it's on paper, signed, agreed to.
So you would advise your sellers to say, listen, submit your offer. And as a part of that offer, tell me what you want as a commission. Mm-hmm. We can negotiate it at that point.
Yeah.
That way you're not having your sellers pre-negotiate something where, hey, what will you pay? Well, we'll pay 3%, but the buyer's agent would have taken 1.5%.
Well, it comes down to this. Did the buyer's agent do their job?
Yeah.
Did they advise the buyer on why this house is priced right? Is it priced right? Does it have the right features? Or is there competition? You know, if they bring a strong offer and they're asking for compensation, as a seller, you should be prepared to say, well, this is pretty good. I'll go ahead and accept.
I am as a seller, like thinking, hey, bring me a full price offer. We'll give you the full commission. Easy. But I didn't think to say, hey, just make your offer. Tell me what you want. We'll negotiate it all as a part of the offer. Mm-hmm. I like that, though. That's automatically, that's what we're doing from here on out.
Well, if you remember that era we talked about, 2012, 2013, bank owned, you know, I was working with buyers for a year, throwing offers on stuff, low stuff. Because you saw the listing with like 300 days on market. And you're like, hey, let's just try this low number. When you got to within 95% of the asking price, that was a striking zone. It still felt a little low to the seller, but it was close enough that they would go, it's actually like probably the best offer we've gotten so far. Let's counter that. Mm-hmm. So that's my advice, is when you do realize that it's priced generally in the ballpark where it should be and looks good, but you still want to try to get a deal, you know, be within 96, 97%. And you're going to get the attention from the seller. Right. And it's going to start a better conversation. Right. And it's going to include your concessions as part of it.
Yep. That makes sense. Well, I appreciate that. I think this has been a great conversation, a good time. I really love your content. I'm a big fan and new subscriber. So you guys who are watching my channel, go check out his content. You're going to really like it. He does a great job.
Thank you so much, Robert. I appreciate it. And I can't wait to see more of your guys' deals.
Yeah.
And share some more deal stories of our own right here on this channel.
Let's do it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir.